Hi there, my name is Bridie Murray and I'm the Communications, Community Engagement and Extension Officer for the Victorian Gorse Task Force. Welcome to our online virtual demonstration field day. Throughout the virtual field day, I'll be taking you through some tips on how to achieve effective gorse management on your property. To make life easy, I'll refer to the task force as the VGT. Let's get into it. So firstly, I want to introduce you to the VGT and what they do. The VGT was formed in 1999 and is one of 4 statewide community pest management groups in Victoria. The VGT leads an integrated, community-led approach to reducing gorse across private and public land. We source funding from the government for community-led activities and deliver educational, financial and practical programs to enhance the abilities of landowners to effectively manage their gorse. The VGT committee is made up of voluntary members who have successfully controlled gorse on their land, as well as in their respected agricultural, natural resource, pest and catchment management careers. The VGT works with private landowners as well as public land managers such as the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, local councils and catchment management authorities. So our first tip to get ahead with your gorse management is to understand the Victorian Gorse Task Force are here to help. Gorse management is a long-term commitment. Therefore, having assistance from the VGT is beneficial, especially if you are just starting out. As I previously mentioned, the VGT committee is made up of industry experts, and their expertise has been manifested into resources, including a best practice guide, a glove box identification guide, and a control strategy as a few examples. Another resource is the VGT website, which is www.vicgorsetaskforce.com.au. The VGT's website will keep you up to date on their programs, has a frequently asked questions page, and contains educational videos on a range of gorse topics, such as fire safety, pest species, and land value. Lastly, we run a community grants program, and I'll explain the program in detail at the end of the day. Tip number 2 is to understand the 5 main components to a successful gorse control program. This list is taken straight from our best practice guide, and it reads as follows. Treating as many plants as possible before they set seed. The use of a combination of control methods. Revegetation and a change in the land use practices that allow gorse to spread and grow, a long-term commitment from the land manager, and to be persistent and regularly follow up with inspections of previous season's work. If you remember one thing from this virtual field day, remember this slide. I'll now explain where these components fit into your gorse management plan. Tip number 3 is to decide on a treatment plan and see it through. This is where the first 3 components come in. Using a combination of control methods, treating as many plants as possible before they set seed, and changing the way the land is used should all be included in your treatment plan. The first aspect you'll need to decide is what control methods you should use for your infestation size and personal circumstance. It is presumed that there is a preferred control method, and that's simply not the case. All the relevant control methods are detailed in the best practice guide, and there is a summary of the advantages and disadvantages of each. Seeking advice from experts such as contractors or land care groups is advised to ensure you have thoroughly researched each option. You need to decide what is best for you. As an example, John Smith and Betty Brown both have medium-sized, dense infestations of gorse on their properties. John decided to hire a contractor, and they used an eco blade to cut and spray the entire patch. John then spot sprayed the regrowth and revegetated with native shrubs. Betty, on the other hand, wanted to change her land into an organic produce farm, and therefore didn't want to use chemical. She decided to hire a contractor to mulch down the patch and use a biological control to manage the regrowth. 2 treatment plans with different control methods but the same fundamental components used in each. Now that you understand the thought and research that's needed to decide on your treatment plan, let's have a look at a few of the control methods available. Cut and paint is an effective method for small, easily accessible infestations. Let's learn about it further.
Cut and paint is where the gorse bush is cut off completely at its base, using a chainsaw, axe, brush cutter, handsaw or large pruning shears, depending on the thickness of the stem trunk. A herbicide solution is then sprayed or painted onto the exposed surface of the cut stump, emerging from the ground immediately, with the objective of killing the stump and the root system. Ensure you always use the correct and recommended PPE when using any herbicides. Refer to the product label for advice. Cut and paint is best suited where you have small infestations only, as the method is very labour intensive. To be effective, stems require painting immediately after cutting, and ideally should be done prior to flowering and seeding. The advantages of using cut and paint is that the amount of chemical used is less compared to spraying, and it is more targeted to the stem and root system of the weed. There are risks associated with using cut and paint. Under Victorian legislation, there are controls on the use of agricultural chemicals, and it is the responsibility of the user to be familiar with this legislation. Some chemicals require the user to hold an Agricultural Chemical Users Permit, ACUP. Choose only products registered for use in your situation, and always read the label and follow the instructions carefully. Chemical control can be extremely effective in controlling gorse. But remember, more than one application will be needed to kill all the bushes in large infestations, and chemical control methods will not destroy the seed bank.
Foliar spraying is suitable for all infestation sizes, and full coverage of the plant is required. Have a listen.
Foliar spraying is when a herbicide registered for gorse control is diluted with water, as specified on the product label, and sprayed over the foliage to point of runoff, until every leaf is wetted but not dripping. Foliar spraying can be done in a number of ways, depending on the size of the gorse infestation. Before any spraying is undertaken, you must ensure you use the correct PPE, and any chemicals are handled in accordance with the instructions on the chemical label. Small infestations can be sprayed using a backpack knapsack spray unit. Spot spraying is used to treat individual gorse plants or areas that only have small clumps of gorse infestations. For large infestations that need targeted applications of herbicide, a hose and handgun can be used to spray solution from a herbicide tank and pump mounted on a utility vehicle. Depending on your personal situation and level of qualification in using equipment and chemicals, you may wish to do it yourself or engage a registered contractor to carry out the work. Equipment can be purchased or, in some situations, hired from rural agricultural equipment suppliers. Your local Landcare group may also have units for hire. A registered contractor will have the necessary equipment, skills and experience required to complete the job. Compared to the cost of purchasing equipment and your own time, engaging a contractor may be more cost-effective. There are a number of risks associated with using chemicals and, in particular, foliar spraying. Under Victorian legislation, there are controls on the use of agricultural chemicals, and it is the responsibility of the user to be familiar with this legislation. Some chemicals require the user to hold an Agricultural Chemical Users Permit, ACUP. Choose only products registered for use in your situation, and always read the label and follow the instructions carefully. Foliar spraying risks include the potential for spray drift and off-target damage. Before you spray, you'll need to consider the weather conditions and your proximity to vineyards, organic grower crops amongst others, and other sensitive areas. Chemical control using foliar spraying can be extremely effective in controlling gorse. But remember, more than one application will be needed to kill all the bushes in large infestations. Chemical control methods will not destroy the seed bank.
chemical is not for you, then mechanically removing your gorse could be a better option. Listen in.
Mulching is the process of mechanically cutting the gorse using a rotating mulching head, mounted on either a tractor, an excavator boom or a skid steer. The mulch debris is left on the ground surface and in dense infestations can provide a physical cover over the ground. Situations where you would use a mulcher are where you have large mature infestations of gorse spread over large areas of your property. The type of mulcher best suited for your property will depend on the slope of your land and the level of access available. For example, open flat areas with good access are best suited to wide tractor-mounted mulchers, whereas more confined areas with steep slopes, such as stream banks, are best treated with mulchers attached to skid steers or excavator arms, which have better reach and accessibility. There are many advantages of using a mulcher. Mulching suppresses regrowth and reduces the height of the bushes for follow-up spraying. It reduces the size of bushes with little soil disturbance. The fire risk of gorse will be significantly reduced. It improves access for a range of follow-up treatments and enables more effective chemical treatment using less chemical volume. It stops seed production if done prior to or during flowering. The risks associated with mulching are that the technique alone will not kill gorse. Follow-up treatment of regrowth will be required. This control method requires the use of heavy machinery, and it is recommended landholders engage an approved registered contractor.
If we haven't mentioned an option that is right for your property, then you might need to consider alternative controls. We will explain them now.
There are a range of alternative gorse control methods available for landholders that do not require the use of chemical herbicides or heavy machinery. Alternative control methods include burning, grazing, biocontrol, pasture management and revegetation. Alternative control methods are in many cases slower to implement, more labour intensive and require a longer-term commitment from landholders to be successful. Alternative control methods may be used in different situations. Some examples include where chemical use is inappropriate or unwanted. For example, organic farms, proximity to sensitive crops or environmental areas, and on steep slopes, inaccessible areas, waterways, and high conservation areas. Burning is a useful method to reduce the physical size of large bushes and allow access and follow-up treatment. Ensure a hot burn and do not burn gorse for at least 12 months after spraying. Remember, burning will promote new germination and seedling regrowth will require follow-up treatment. Grazing is most effective on young seedling regrowth. Using sheep or goats with sustained grazing pressure over a number of years is required to be effective. There are a number of biocontrol agents in use which provide limited control and at best only reduce the level of flowering and seed production. Competitive pastures like ryegrass and phalaris can reduce gorse seedling establishment and growth in pasture situations. Use heavy seeding rates when sowing. Ensure adequate soil fertility and prevent overgrazing and bare areas. Dense revegetation with native trees and shrubs to provide a canopy cover can help reduce gorse establishment and growth. But be prepared to carry out treatment of gorse seedling regrowth where required. When undertaking alternative or conventional gorse control methods, always remember, talk to your neighbours to ensure a more effective and coordinated approach. Gorse establishes more readily after disturbance, so minimising disturbance to soil, for example by cultivation, fire, heavy vehicles or overgrazing, is a good strategy to reduce the establishment and spread of gorse.
So those control methods are listed in our best practice guide, which is on the website, and as the video stated, you should use a combination of treatments. Once you've decided on a plan, it's time to take action. Be aware that you don't need to hit it all at once. As a general rule, you should start by controlling the juvenile, dispersing gorse patches instead of the mature infestation to stop the spread, and also feel a sense of achievement for your starting efforts. A good example of this is spot spraying smaller gorse plants around a larger infestation whilst you are saving money for a contractor to come and control the larger patch. So in this example, areas 1 to 4 and the neighbouring boundary line of area 5 should be controlled first, and their follow-up treatments should be annual and regular before the mature infestation, being the rest of area 5, is controlled. Be aware that the seeds are very strong and remain viable in the soil, so there's a good chance you are controlling the gorse that you've worked on, but new seeds are germinating from the seed bank. Also, considering you are taking the time to put your plant into action, it's worth considering if the neighbouring properties have gorse too. A community approach is more effective than an individual approach, so watch the next slide to learn about boundary gorse removal.
Be respectful of your neighbours. Good neighbours equals good community. Once gorse becomes established, it's very difficult to eradicate, so preventing its spread should be your number one goal. Preventing spread across your property and onto neighbouring properties is your highest priority. Remember, it's both your legal and moral responsibility to do so. Controlling gorse along your boundary should be one of your highest priorities of your property control program to prevent the spread of gorse onto neighbouring properties. Gorse does not respect property boundaries and will spread across fence lines and down waterways onto adjoining properties. Gorse control along boundaries is more effective when undertaken in collaboration with your neighbour. There are many benefits of working together with your neighbour in controlling gorse. Cooperation on a whole range of neighbourly matters makes a lot of sense. By working with your neighbour controlling gorse, you can help motivate and support one another at tackling a job that may seem impossible on your own, and share equipment and resources or the cost of a contractor to complete the work. By working together, you'll get to know your neighbour better and hopefully reduce the risks of disagreements developing. If you have contacted your neighbour to discuss your concerns and plans to control gorse together, and your neighbour is not willing to cooperate, you have the option of lodging a formal written complaint with Agriculture Victoria.
Our next tip is to follow up regularly. This is where the final two components take action. You need to be committed long term and be persistent with your maintenance for your gorse management to be successful. Whatever you do, don't start controlling your gorse and then stop to take a break for a few years, because if you do, you'll just be back where you started with less money and less patience. The VJT encourages you to think of gorse control like you would your normal gardening. You would weed your garden a few times a year, and you should manage your gorse the same way. Stay vigilant, understand that persistence is key, and don't get disheartened if it takes a few years for your gorse patch to thin out. The VGT run an annual community grants program that involves groups applying for either a small or a large grant. The small grant requires a minimum of 2 participants and the large grant requires a minimum of 5. And by participants, we mean properties. This is because we want to change the community attitude to gorse management and not simply give money out to individual households spread across Victoria. We run the program this way because an effective and successful weed management program is a group effort, where the aims and efforts of private and public land managers align. The grants are a dollar for dollar contribution, and each household can receive a maximum of $1,000. We understand this may not cover all of your gorse management costs, but as controlling gorse is a legal requirement, it's a good incentive to start. We also recommend approaching your land care group to see if they are considering applying, as they could provide extra support or use of equipment if successful. For more information about the grants program, please see our website. Our last tip is to seek further advice from local environmental groups so that you know what's happening in your area. Some land care groups may already have a gorse removal project underway. They could have spray equipment you can hire as a member, and a select few even provide financial rebates for chemical. They have a wealth of experience and knowledge to draw from and are a fantastic social group to be a part of as well. In addition to land care groups, I've listed the relevant public land managers you could contact if they have an impact on your personal circumstance. If you are calling with a complaint about public land, I encourage you to ask questions about their weed management plan for the area. Public land managers work off a restricted budget and normally have a structured weed management plan for the coming years, which they'll be happy to talk to you about. Lastly, I've listed the local Aboriginal groups and farming supply shops as extra places to seek advice from. Aboriginal groups often have a long history with the land, and your local farming supplies place are up to date with the latest chemicals that will work well in your area. Both can be very useful when thinking about weed management or revegetation. So that brings us to the end of our virtual field day. We hope you've learnt a lot and the tips that we've talked about will help you with your gorse control journeys. Please don't hesitate to get in contact with us through any of the resources on this slide. Thanks very much and good luck!